about ongoing race and gender pay equity issues at Rutgers University. As we all know, workers across the country, indeed across the world, have been pushing for better workplace conditions and better pay equity. And our own Rutgers University has been a leader in pushing for pay equity based on race and gender. As many people know, we have a historic discrimination case, pay equity case, that is basically using the standard set by the New Jersey Equal Pay Act of 2018, which is really a leading legal provision for pay equity in the nation. So in many ways, all eyes are on New Jersey, the Garden State, and on Rutgers to see how this will be handled. We have 5 female professors at Rutgers who have filed a lawsuit to demand full pay equity for substantially similar work. We have with us today 2 of the members of the group that we've come to call the Fab Five, who have walked in the footsteps of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. As we know, decades ago, she also was among those who pushed for pay equity in the workplace and was able to receive that. So we are awfully proud of these courageous individuals who are leading the way. And so I'm going to introduce everyone as we go along. I just want to give you a heads up about who will be speaking today. We're going to hear from Deepa Kumar, Haydee Herrera Guzman, Kate Cairns, and then Donna Murch. First up, Deepa Kumar is a professor of journalism and media studies at Rutgers, New Brunswick, and again, one of the 5 plaintiffs in the lawsuit against Rutgers for violating the state Equal Pay Act. She is a past president of Rutgers AAUP-AFT and is currently an executive council member. Dr. Kumar is also the inaugural chair of the university's STRIDE committee, which stands for Strategies and Tactics for Improving Diversity and Excellence. And I am honored to have worked with Dr. Kumar in the union and also on the STRIDE committee. Professor Kumar, we are excited to have you here today. If you can really speak to us about what it has been like for you as one of the plaintiffs, and also if you could speak to the vision that workers had at Rutgers University in putting these provisions in play during the last contract campaign.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alexander Floyd. It's my pleasure to be here. So as was said by Professor Alexander Floyd, I'm a professor in journalism and media studies. I'm also the inaugural chair of the STRIDE committee in New Brunswick. I'm one of 3 faculty directors of the Faculty Diversity Collaborative and the founding co-chair of the University Committee on Diversity, Race, and Gender, which is a joint committee between the union and the administration to represent the interests of BIPOC and female faculty and graduate students on all 3 campuses. I begin with this introduction to demonstrate my deep commitment to gender and race equity and to the university's mission of enhancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, I want to use the time I have now to point out that Rutgers is failing miserably on the question of equity. The current process that we have is a product of our contract settlement in 2019. This was the result of an almost strike when Rutgers management had no choice but to give us this important provision. Of course, I will be the first to admit that it's far from perfect, and the university and union are in the process of negotiating a fair, transparent, and just process. But it was nevertheless a historic and remarkable step forward, Labor scholars have called this a trendsetter for universities across the country. And for us, it was a method by which to realize and make tangible the Diane B. Allen Pay Equity Act that was passed in 2018. Now, this act, as Nicole mentioned, is regarded as one of the strongest pay equity laws in the country. And what we sought to do as a union was to make that law a reality for faculty at Rutgers, saving them the time, the energy, not to mention the resources needed to file a lawsuit. I was president of the AAUP-AFT at the time, and I championed this pay equity process because of my own experience, as well as those who I have counseled and helped over the last decade. Now, I will speak to my case and let others tell their own stories. And I'll tell the story briefly. In 2016, I approached my dean because the female associate professors in my department were earning significantly less than our male counterparts. I put forward a letter and my CV with the help of several distinguished professors who had similarly assisted other women in situations such as mine. So in other words, I put in a very robust proposal. My dean rejected my request, stating that my publications were not sufficient to warrant a pay adjustment. That summer, I was given a prestigious award in recognition of my scholarship, directly contradicting my dean's assessment. I waited a year, and after having 4 journal articles and 2 book chapters accepted for publication, I submitted another letter, this time comparing myself to my colleagues and showing in no uncertain terms that my record matched those of my peers and even exceeded it. I have no grudges against my peers. I applaud the fact that they have good salaries. All I'm saying is that I need to be respected in the same way. However, despite providing this evidence to the dean rejected my request, stating that my scholarly record was not exceptional, and therefore I was unworthy of a salary adjustment. That same evening, my department gave me the Extraordinary Accomplishment in Research Award, again contradicting my dean's biased assessment. What this experience showed me is that no matter how much evidence we may marshal, no matter how many awards we may receive, gender and race discrimination gets in the way of pay equity. The research shows that women and people of color need to be twice, 3 times, or even many more times as productive as their white counterparts to be seen as equal. And even then, there is no guarantee of equal pay. I am therefore part of the lawsuit against Rutgers for its violation of the Diane B. Allen Pay Equity Act. The gap between my salary and that of my comparator is close to $50,000. Yet I have been offered 1/5 of that amount through a process used by the university that is completely distorted and unfair. How is it equity when 80% of the gap with my comparator, with the named comparator in the lawsuit, continues to be maintained? And we have seen, unfortunately, the same happening with other faculty, and possibly even worse for our colleagues at our Camden campus. Rutgers recently renamed a building in honor of the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was part of our law school faculty. What was not highlighted at the ceremony, at this naming ceremony, was that Justice Ginsburg was part of a class action lawsuit for pay discrimination. She and her colleagues at Rutgers won their lawsuit and received substantial pay raises. And I will end with this. If Rutgers is really serious about honoring Justice Ginsburg, if it is serious about diversity, equity, and inclusion, President Holloway needs to work with the union to bring about real pay equity. This means rejecting the bogus system that the university's compensation services is using, a system very likely put in place at the advice of the anti-union law firm Jackson Lewis, and accepting the current proposal that has been put forward by the union. As lawyer Nancy Smith of the law firm Smith and Mullen put it last month on Twitter, quote, Rutgers University needs new HR and legal leadership based on ethics and justice, end quote. This is good advice from one of the authors of the Diane B. Allen Act, and I hope that it is taken seriously. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kumar. Ethics and justice indeed is what we are after. Up next, we are going to hear from Haydee Herrera Guzman. She is an associate professor of mathematical sciences at Rutgers Camden and is one of the 5 plaintiffs in the, again, historic pay equity lawsuit against Rutgers University and a member of the Rutgers AAUP Executive Council. Professor Herrera Guzman, welcome, and thank you for sharing your perspective with us on today.
Thank you very much, Professor Alexander Floyd, for your introduction. So let me repeat it again. Hello, my name is Haydee Herrera. I'm an associate professor at the Department of Mathematical Sciences at Rutgers Camden. I applied for a salary equity review request almost 2 years ago and only recently received a recommendation from Compensation Services. The recommendation was a disappointment. Compensation Services replaced the faculty peers that have similar experience and achievements as me, or comparators, and whom I chose by a different list. The original list was actually endorsed by the Deans of Arts and Sciences. Now, the reasons for the change of comparators took another month to be provided. And in the letter, there were no consistent explanations for the replacements of comparators. It seemed that the only systemic feature was to lower the differences between my salary and that of my new comparators. The change in comparators resulted in a recommendation that was significantly reduced from the recommendation initially made by the dean. I'm a plaintiff in a lawsuit against Rutgers University that asserts a claim for violation of the New Jersey Diane B. Allen Equal Pay Act. I was able to join in the lawsuit because I'm a tenured professor that enjoys job security. But there are many more faculty and staff who are more vulnerable and may be afraid of coming forward or speaking up for fear of retaliation. I would like to see a fair and just process to apply for equity pay adjustments for everyone, particularly for the more vulnerable members of the university. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Professor, for sharing your experience and what it is that really led you to join this lawsuit. Next up, we're going to hear from Kate Cairns. Kate Cairns is an associate professor of childhood studies at Rutgers Camden and a member of the Rutgers AAUP-AFT Executive Council. We're delighted to have you here and particularly interested in the insight that you have about the really deep and egregious pay equities happening between campuses, particularly in Camden. Welcome.
Thank you so much for that introduction and for this opportunity to speak today. So yes, I am Kate Cairns, and I'm an associate professor of childhood studies at Rutgers Camden. And like many Camden faculty, I am paid substantially less than my New Brunswick colleagues, 26% less to be exact, based on our union's analysis. But that is not actually what I want to focus on today. And that's because the inequities at Rutgers go far beyond faculty pay. So I think it's crucial actually that we understand the fight for pay equity as part of a broader struggle for the recognition and resources that Rutgers Camden deserves. So beyond professors' salaries, this is a struggle about the long-standing systemic devaluing of the Camden campus and community. At Rutgers, we have a budgeting system that forces Camden into perpetual austerity, effectively punishing our campus for expanding access to low-income and first-generation students. I think it's important to note that this is a campus that disproportionately serves students of color and that is located in a predominantly Black and brown city. So when the Rutgers Central Administration devalues Camden faculty, it is devaluing Camden students, staff, and residents. To say that Camden faculty are worth less is to say that this place and these people are worth less.
Right.
So in my own research, I work closely with Camden youth who are organizing for food and environmental justice in their communities. And in our conversations, these young people have repeatedly expressed frustration and anger with the way that their city is perceived by outsiders. So they talk about the hurt of denigrating racist stereotypes that they encounter in the media, and the way that these stereotypes actually obscure the histories of disinvestment, inequitable development, and structural racism that continue to shape life in Camden. So when Rutgers tells Camden faculty, staff, and students that they're worth less than their New Brunswick counterparts, they are participating in this systemic devaluing of the city and the people who live here. Central administration loves to talk about the family feel of the Camden campus, and it's true that as a small, tight-knit community, we're sustained by close relationships among students, staff, and faculty. And I know for myself, these relationships I value them deeply. But I think that it's important that we don't let warm and fuzzy claims about family distract from the real injustices that we face. So last month, when the Dean of Arts and Sciences was abruptly fired in the middle of the semester with no warning, no reason, and no replacement, Camden faculty, staff, and students came together to say, we won't stand for this. We demand a voice in decisions about our campus. We demand the funding that our students need to thrive, and we demand equitable pay for all of those who work here. And so the struggle for faculty pay equity is one piece of this broader fight. Thank you.
All right, thank you so very much, Professor Cairns, to remind us that this is about something that is so much bigger in terms of how it is that we walk our talk. Right? If we are one Rutgers, then that has to show through in every single way, especially how it is that we value our students and our faculty and the communities that we serve. Finally, we are going to hear today from one of our really treasured activists, Professor Donna Murch, who is an associate professor of history at Rutgers, New Brunswick. Professor Murch is also president of the New Brunswick chapter of Rutgers AAUP-AFT and co-chair of the union's BIPOC committee. So Dr. Murch, we're so happy to have you here, and please share your insights about the impact of these disparities, what it bodes for the history of the university, and what your thinking is in terms of where we are in this process.
Thank you so much, Professor Alexander Floyd. As you can see, I keep moving forward and back because I'm literally trying to dodge the sun. So I'm happy that I have it, but it makes it hard to see and be seen. First, I want to thank all my colleagues for their incredible activism, the amount of time and labor and thought devoted to fighting for structural equity at all three campuses and on the basis of gender. I'm going to build on the powerful remarks of Professor Cairns and thinking about how we place the fight over pay equity within the larger trajectory of union struggle and union activism. We are also blessed to have the chapter president of Camden, Jim Brown, on this call. And so when we get to the question and answer period, please direct your questions to all of us. Some of the history, I'm a historian, which means I can't resist placing some of this within a larger trajectory, and people have already talked about this larger history, but I do just want to take us back to our 2019 contract campaign that was led by President of the time of the union, Deepak Kumar. And it was a fight in order to have structural equity based on gender, but also based on campus. So it is out of that context of that union contract and what was an enormous win, both for race and gender, but also structural inequity between campuses, which clearly is also, as Professor Cairns stressed, core to how we understand racial disparity at Rutgers. So the idea was that when in our 2019 contract was that we were going to provide out-of-cycle increases for people facing disparities based on gender and on campus. And it was very clear that there was an enormous disparity between New Brunswick, which at the time, President Robert Barchi was deeply invested in making it the flagship campus and drawing all of the resources towards New Brunswick. And he even used that language of calling Newark and Camden service campuses. This is something that the union actively fought. It understood the kind of racism that was implicit in that. It has also manifested itself in the building of the Honors College, which was another way to concentrate resources on the New Brunswick campus. So it's impossible to separate pay equity from this larger fight in urban New Jersey, right? This is a city that has some of the highest property taxes in the country. It is also a deeply diverse state with the largest African immigrant population and huge class and racial disparities between the haves and have-nots. Situated within this is Rutgers University campus and our pay equity fight, both on the basis of gender and on the basis of campus. So in response to this victory of the union, Robert Barchi retained one of the biggest anti-labor law firms that our former president Deepak Kumar mentioned, Jackson Lewis. This was revealed to us in a transparency request that we made that at that time, in 2020, at the beginning of the pandemic is when we received this information. While Rutgers was laying off 20% of its part-time lecturers and ultimately 5% of its entire workforce, it was paying Jackson Lewis over $2 million. We really hoped that with our new president, that we would have a reset, right? We're very excited to have our first African-American president, and we were looking towards a real shift in policy. Unfortunately, President Jonathan Holloway has continued to retain Jackson Lewis. And in fact, what's one of the most disturbing things that's happened that we see, the lens that we have through this is Camden, is that a new site of market growth for Jackson Lewis is responding to the state level pay equity, gender pay equity in creating essentially black box algorithms by employers, which make it very difficult for individual plaintiffs or for collective action of unions to determine exactly what are these quantitative measures that are being taken to limit pay equity. And one of the saddest things about what's happened is now, not only have we not seen a kind of reparative justice around these issues of pay equity by campus, but there is evidence that they have actually been made worse by shifting the comparators from New Brunswick comparators to Camden. So we saw the increases in pay equity based on gender for people in New Brunswick still woefully insufficient, but the disparity between that and the Newark and the Camden campuses has actually made these structural disparities between campuses worse. One important point I want to make that links this larger questions, not only of faculty pay equity, but also to students and the communities which are served by Rutgers, is that Rutgers Camden instituted a program called Bridging the Gap, I think in 2014 or 2015, which doubled the entire student body. How did it do this? It showed that the majority of so many people in New Jersey, the reason they're not attending college is because they can't afford it. They took families that had household incomes of $60,000 or less and said, you can attend, your children can attend Rutgers for free. And if you have household income up to 100,000, you can attend for partial tuition remittance. So imagine the enormous need that exists in New Jersey. It doubled the student population. Instead of rewarding the Camden campus for meeting precisely the kinds of visions of an equitable and democratic university, Camden has been punished and has been structurally indebted. So it's in this context that I just want us to think about pay equity. It's important for faculty, but it is directly connected to families in New Jersey. And we are in the shadow of the largest Black protest movement in history. So 26 million people went out on the streets in 2020, 40% of all counties in the United States. And we've had a lot of discussion about how we frame our current struggles at a public university in terms of the civil rights movement and beloved community. But we want to understand how the firing of Dean Marchitello for arguing that pay equity was part of a longer structural indebting of the Camden campus, that this is also at its core a racial justice struggle. So I'm really proud to be here with my colleagues and proud to think about how we as a public sector union that works in conjunction with all of the workers at Rutgers want to create a kind of higher education that is accessible to all and equitable for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Murch. That's right. And everything that you've described, as well as all of the other speakers today, emphasize how it is that Rutgers can truly live out the reality of our name, the State University of New Jersey. I was particularly moved by your underscoring that with the new President Holloway, we did not experience a reset, but indeed a setback in terms of some of the key objectives in terms of equity. So we want to again thank all of our presenters here today and open things up now for the community to ask questions for any of the panelists. And again, we also have other members of the union community, Rutgers community in Camden that you could also forward questions to.
Hi, this is Kelly Habor at the Star Ledger.
Yes.
Do you have any idea how many people have applied through the program at Rutgers to have their pay adjusted, and how many have objected to the adjustment they were given?
That's an excellent question. And I will turn that over to Professor Kumar. I think that she would probably have the best sense of what that's looking like right now.
Unfortunately, I don't have those details. What I can say is that back at the end of October, Rutgers released 103 of the several hundred people who have applied, their cases and the decision around their cases. As the union, we have a record of many of these cases, but not everyone had to go through the union. What we do know is that it was these first 103 were people who applied within the first 6 months of when this program went into effect. And everybody else who's applied from January 1st, 2020 onwards, and we're talking now about almost 2 years, have heard nothing back. So I don't know how many people have objected. I certainly know that all 5 of us who are plaintiffs have written appeals to our chancellors to object. And through hearsay, I know that others have done so as well. But understandably, there are those, again, this is personal communication to me. I don't have official statistics. There are those who feel like the process is so broken that there's really no point in putting the time and energy into actually putting forward an appeal, because it's going to result in nothing. I mean, the amount of time, I can't even tell you, Kelly, that it takes to be part of something like this is astounding. Hundreds and hundreds of hours that we could be spending on everything else. But we do this because we want a collective model of justice for everyone.
And I would just underscore that it has been actually 2 different administrations that have accounted for this backlog in dealing with these requests, as Professor Kumar pointed out. I was a member of the Faculty Senate at the time when President Holloway first came to Rutgers and asked directly about his plans to address what at the time were over 100 people who had been waiting for well over a year to get a response. And he said that he had only learned of it in the past 2 days, and he would make it a priority in terms of addressing it. But we're here today still asking for and really demanding that we have attention to this matter. What are your thoughts? Well, I'll just stop there. I have a question, but I'll see if anybody else has a question out there. Thank you so much for your question, Kelly. Well, one of the burning questions I think that many of us have has to do with really why we are having this press conference today before the Board of Governors meeting. Last Board of Governors meeting, we know, and I want to try to cite the president of the university directly in a Targum, recent Targum article. It said that, quote, where the president's remarks were, quote, mischaracterized in his opinion, right? And it seems that there's an effort to maybe walk back some of what he said. So I wanted to actually recount exactly what President Holloway said at the last Board of Governors meeting, quote, I hear all of you loud and clear, and I am determined again, these are President Holloway's words, right? I am determined that we will address pay equity concerns in a way such that you will not have to come back to the Board of Governors repeating the very powerful and poignant stories and personal sentiments again, end quote. That to me sounds abundantly clear, as the saying goes. We are here again at today's Board of Governors meeting. What do you think this particular attempt to walk back accountability, what that can hold out for what we can expect today, and then for future relations, with the university? And any of you can address that. But Professor Brown, if you have any thoughts about that, we'd be happy to hear your thoughts.
Sure, I had a feeling you might call on me for this one. Well, yeah, I think it's disappointing. It was actually encouraging to hear that level of sort of that was a very clear statement of purpose. Before December 7th, we will deal with this. There's a reason that we sort of have honed in on that statement and really focused on it, because that was a deadline that the president gave himself. That's not a deadline that anyone else gave. And it's disappointing to have it walked back in this way, to sort of, I guess, sort of gaslight people who are just reading words on a page, who are saying it was very clear what your intentions were at that last Board of Governors meeting. There were a lot of people in Camden organized around that Board of Governors meeting to think, or to sort of ask the administration to address this problem, both outside and in the Zoom call with questions. So I think, unfortunately, it's a part of a broader pattern of a kind of lack of will, a lack of will to sort of just deal with this problem. I mean, the person who has the power to deal with this problem is President Holloway. It continues to get dragged out because he is not acting. That's the way I look at that.
Thank you so much, Professor Brown. And I think that there is a hope on behalf of some that, you know, if we just keep pushing things along, you know, kicking the can down the road, that eventually people are going to tire out. But what I saw, many of us saw and participated in recently, was really a uprising led by you know, the community at Camden. What would you say to those who might think that, well, people at Rutgers around these issues, that somehow we're just going to be tired or worn down?
Well, I would say two things. One, to be quite honest with you, people are tired, but their response to that exhaustion has been to organize harder and to sort of have really important conversations with students, faculty, and staff in Camden about how we organize together in a collective way to advocate for the campus. Because to date, it has not felt like there's anyone in the administration who's going to do that advocacy for us. So there's certainly, it's been a big and difficult couple of months in Camden. There's been a lot of hard work to sort of respond to the things that are happening, but there's no, there will be no sort of slowing down. There will be no being quiet, and that they can't run out the clock any further. I think that's pretty clear. Here we are 2 years plus further, and we're still talking about it. So I would just say there's a lot of energy in Camden to make sure that we speak to the issues that Professor Cairns brought up earlier, and that Professor March brought up earlier as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Again, for those who may just be joining us, you just heard from Jim Brown, who is president of the Camden chapter of Rutgers AAUP-AFT and associate professor of English there. And we have a response now from Donna Murch in history at Rutgers, New Brunswick. Professor Murch.
Thank you so much, Professors Brown and Professor Alexander Floyd. Both of you spoke so clearly about what the issues confronting us are. In terms of running out of steam, we are organizing next semester. We are planning a freedom school, which is our union's kind of political education that's focused specifically on Camden. Our tentative date is for the Martin Luther King Day this coming January, which to me seems so appropriate. Mm-hmm. So our goal is to think not only about the issues of faculty governance when Dean Marchitello was fired, but the reason he was fired for his remarks about linking pay equity to structural underfunding of the campus. I think in some ways, Camden is a microcosm of what we're facing in 2021. We had this enormous outpouring with 26 million people protesting, lots of corporate sponsorship and pretty words and framing. But what we're seeing a year out is that the kinds of structural disparities that produce disproportionate death of Black and Brown people from COVID, the disproportionate incarceration and targeted incarceration, the Black-white wealth gap, which is now by some estimates as big as 1 to 20 or 1 in 13, according to Pew Research Institute, and for Latinx populations, 1 to 8, white wealth to brown wealth. So I see Camden as a microcosm, and I've taught at Rutgers for many years. This is my 18th year. And one of the reasons I have stayed at Rutgers and valued it and really devoted myself also to working with the union is that Rutgers is a place that sits in 3 majority Black and Brown cities in a deep blue state. And we have a very special opportunity to honor that and to think about how we use the resources of our public university to serve those communities. So please stay tuned. Come to our Freedom School, Martin Luther King Day. We're going to have undergraduates, graduates, faculty, staff, all talking about this question of structural disparity. I came from a very working class, post-industrial city in Western Pennsylvania, and I think the struggles of Camden are absolutely central to how we understand racial justice today.
All right. Thank you, Professors Brown and Murch. I hear loud and clearly, the words of Fannie Lou Hamer being echoed. We're sick and tired of being sick and tired, and that there is no faint, no quit, and no stop in us. We are going to continue to press for what it is that we know the people of the Garden State deserve, and to make sure that the promise of the state becomes a reality. And so I would like to thank everyone for taking out time to be with us here for this press conference prior to the Board of Governors meeting. Again, thanks to all of the union staff, as well as the presenters here today, Professors Deepa Kumar, Haydee Herrera Guzman, Kate Cairns, Donna Murch, and Jim Brown. Thank you so very much. And we look forward to the Board of Governors meeting later today.